Any volunteers to read today?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I can read, Prabhu.
Yeah, sure. Who's this?
This is Leelamai, Prabhu.
Yes, Mataji, please.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada had so many centers in the US that to visit each one was not practical. During his year in India, many new centers had opened on the West Coast, in Florida, Texas, the Midwest, the East. Prabhupada said he had more establishments than a wealthy businessman and more residences. Were he to stay at each of his houses he quipped, he couldn't visit them all in a year, and especially to Indian audiences, he would cite the monthly expenditures for his centers. Though proud of ISKCON's growth, Prabhupada was never proud of his own account. He never considered using ISKCON for his own enjoyment. Whenever he visited a center, his quarters were usually an apartment arranged at the last minute, often fraught with annoyances like noisy neighbors and incompetent cooks. At 75 years, his constant traveling was hardly an arrangement for his health and comfort. Prabhupada never felt complacent over the small success of his society enjoyed, nor would he claim the credit for that success. Rather, he said it was due to the mercy of his spiritual master and the previous spiritual masters. ISKCON still had but little influence on the world. People considered it small, exotic religious sect. People considered it a small, exotic religious sect. But by the blessings of the previous acharyas, it was growing. Prabhupada was initiating more and more disciples, and the potential was unlimited. One of Lord Chaitanya's chief followers, Jiva Goswami, had warned that a spiritual master should not accept many disciples. Many neophyte disciples would bring suffering to the spiritual master. Yet, on Prabhupada's US tour during the summer of 1971, he initiated more disciples than ever before. As Lord Chaitanya's empowered representative, he wanted to increase the number of devotees more and more. He was aware of the risk, but he was also aware of the great need, as he had written in the Nectar of Devotion. The one point is that without increasing the number of disciples, there is no propagation of the cult of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sometimes, even at a risk, a sannyasi in the line of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. However, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's test of a prospective disciple's readiness for initiation was standard. The candidate must have followed the 4 rules and chanted 16 rounds daily for at least 6 months and have the recommendation of the temple president and local GBC secretary. Prabhupada accepted anyone who fulfilled these conditions, and he expected the disciple to remain sincere and true to the vows of initiation. Despite Prabhupada's growing number of disciples, he intimately touched each of their hearts. Although a few disciples enjoyed extended association with him, most of his hundreds of disciples saw him only from afar. Yet each of them was certain that Prabhupada was his own. Each could say, "My spiritual master." Each could say Prabhupada and feel close to their dearest friend and well-wisher, the one who was saving them from death. They knew that Prabhupada was the direct representative of Krishna and the most empowered acharya of Lord Chaitanya's message. Those who were sincere knew without doubt that their connection with Prabhupada was transcendental, not to be interrupted or limited by physical or geographical considerations. If they surrendered to Prabhupada's orders, Krishna within their hearts would help them advance. If they were sincere, Krishna would help them become better disciples of Srila Prabhupada. The devotees' love for Prabhupada was not a vague sentiment. He was engaging them in Krishna's service, and they were directly experiencing the transcendental results. Only a devotee, however, could understand Srila Prabhupada's personality or the depth of his disciples' attraction for him or the debt they owed him. No wonder onlookers at the Detroit airport had not understood the apparently delirious devotees in their blissful reception of Srila Prabhupada.
Mati, just hold on. I just want
Yes,
to say,
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay, I've turned on my video. Okay. One important thing that we need to note here is that the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada were experiencing transcendental results. Now, it could be said that even outside of the Krishna consciousness movement, people who practice other things are also experiencing some results. That's a fact. But the results that they're experiencing are not transcendental. Of course, I'm not talking about Vaishnava sects. I'm just talking about non-Vaishnava sects. So these movements, the followers of these movements also experience something. Without experiencing something, of course, maybe some they don't experience anything. So, but they're experiencing something material. But here, Srila Prabhupada's followers were experiencing something which is transcendental. And the nature of transcendence, transcendental is used especially in relationship with Krishna. Although Mayavadis or others may also have, what do you call it? I mean, initially they don't get any transcendental experience, so to speak, because they're not performing devotional service. So eventually, as they purify their hearts, finally they get in touch with transcendence. But in the Krishna consciousness movement, we get in touch with transcendence directly. So, and because of getting in touch with transcendence directly, we experience newer and newer tastes in Krishna consciousness. And we see that Krishna consciousness is an ever expanding phenomenon. So, here it's mentioned only a devotee, however, could understand Srila Prabhupada's personality or the depth of his disciples' attraction for him or the debt they owed him. Now, there are two ways of, not two ways. The activities of a pure devotee could be seen tangibly, externally, manifest to the eyes of the followers. But to understand the depth of Srila Prabhupada's personality, it is not enough to just observe his transcendental activities and the way he dealt with his disciples and followers. To understand the depth of Srila Prabhupada's personality, transcendental personality, it is compulsory or it is inevitable. There is no other way than to study his teachings, his Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Caitanya Charitamrita. That is the only manner in which one can understand the depth of Srila Prabhupada's personality. It is not that those who have not read do not have an experience of Prabhupada. They have an experience, but the depth of experience is directly dependent on how much they have studied what he has given us, the transcendental literatures left by Srila Prabhupada. Okay, we'll continue.
Yes, Prabhu. New York City, July 19, 1971. After Detroit, Prabhupada visited Boston and then flew to New York, where another large group of devotees had gathered. The New York Daily News covered his airport arrival with photos and an article, Swami, How They Love You. Bhavananda, the New York temple president, had decorated the temple room of the Brooklyn Center with bright colors. Prabhupada's Vyasasan was a special creation of plates, stripes, and checks in fuchsia. Is that okay, Prabhu? Blind, black, white, and red. Prabhupada liked it very much. 200 devotees, many having waited for more than a year to be initiated, converged on the Brooklyn temple, and Prabhupada held initiations for 5 consecutive days, initiating around 2 dozen disciples each day. One after another, the young men and women would approach Prabhupada on his multicolored Vyasasan to receive their initiation beads and spiritual names. Those receiving the Brahmana initiation went one by one to see Prabhupada in his room and received the Gayatri Mantra. Madhumangal. I went to Prabhupada's room and offered obeisances. Come here, he said. So I went and sat close to him. He began teaching me the Gayatri Mantra, and I was looking up at him. The sun was right behind his head. He looked like a mountain, like the Himalayas, and I was like a mole, a stone. He was very big, and I seemed very insignificant. I lost it. Okay, yeah. Riktananda. Prabhupada turned to face me, and his eyes seemed like limitless pools of an entrancing liquid. I knew he was focused always on Krishna, and his eyes were a reflection of that happiness. He said something to me, and I said, "No, sir." Saying sir to him seemed natural, and he seemed to be happy that I had said it. Then, in a very clear, soft, steady voice, he began to teach me the Gayatri Mantra. Then he took the sacred thread and put it around my neck and across my shoulder very gracefully and with such precision in his movement. Now, he said, you are a Brahmana. Daivi Shakti. Prabhupada had the Gayatri Mantra written on a small piece of paper. As he was teaching it to me, he had his eyes closed. I would repeat it word for word after him. When he got to the third line, however, instead of saying Guru Devaya, he said the word from the fifth line. I didn't know whether to follow what he said or just say what was on the paper. So I said what was on the paper, and then Prabhupada immediately realized what he had done and changed it. But I suddenly realized that the perfect chanting of mantras was not so significant. Prabhupada was fully absorbed in thinking of Krishna, and although there may have been some apparent flaw in his pronunciation, he was perfect regardless. I saw the real perfection of devotional service was to follow Prabhupada. After I received my Gayatri Mantra, I asked Prabhupada if I could ask him some questions, and he said yes. Srila Prabhupada, I said, I haven't been able to serve you in rapt attention. What can I do to serve you? I was praying he would give me a special service to do for him personally. Chant Hare Krishna was all he said. Is there anything more? I asked. He said, are you married? I said, yes. So he said, serve your husband. I said, my husband and I don't get along. So he said, be a pujari. There are so many things. His answer seemed to solve all my difficulty. First and foremost was to chant Hare Krishna. And in addition to that, there are so many other services. If you don't do one of them, then go on to the next one. There are so many things. When he said those words, it relieved all my anxiety.
Can you just pause there for a minute? Devi Shakti Mataji lives in Vrindavan temple, ISKCON of Vrindavan, and she's a very exemplary devotee. You don't find her, okay, she gave up her husband and got married to someone and did all kinds of things. You don't find that in her. Rather, she just followed what Prabhupada said. If you cannot do that, do something else. But she continued to serve Prabhupada very sincerely and continues to do so even till this day. She is a book distributor. She distributes books in ISKCON Vrindavan. So she's a shining example of someone who's very dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. Please go ahead, Master.
Yes, Prabhu. In New York, Prabhupada lectured gravely and authoritatively from Srimad Bhagavatam. stressing surrender to Krishna through surrendering to the Krishna consciousness movement. Unlike any other Bhagavatam lecturer, Prabhupada was able to offer a movement, a society, and a way of life that were fully Krishna conscious and that gave any interested person practical entrance into the devotional service of the Lord. Someone asked how a person who had been very sinful could be relieved of his karma, and Prabhupada replied simply, "Come and live with us, that's all. Is it very difficult? Our students are all living, they are living with us. You simply come and live with us, and you are free from all karma. Is it difficult? Then do that. We shall give you food, we shall give you shelter, we shall give you nice philosophy. If you want to marry, we shall give you a good wife. What do you want more? So come and live with us, that's all." Prabhupada stressed the same point in his lectures. If a person seeking spiritual fulfillment lived and served with the ISKCON devotees, even material fulfillment would come. These Krishna conscious boys and girls in 60 centers, they are living in the best houses, they are eating the best food, they are in the best consciousness, they have got the best hope, everything best. Their feature of body is best. What material happiness do you want more than this? They have got wife, children, happiness, home, everything full. So material happiness is nothing to a Krishna conscious person. Material happiness will roll at his feet saying, "Please take me, please take me." There is no need of asking for it. Simply be steady and ask Krishna, "Please engage me in your service." Then your satisfaction will automatically come. Don't bother for material happiness. Nandakishore asked, what happens to a person out on the street if we just give him one simply wonderful or some prasadam? So, simply wonderful is a sweet made from powdered milk, butter, and sugar and offered to Lord Krishna. Prabhupada, then it is wonderful, simply wonderful. The devotees laugh. He has not tasted such wonderful sweet in his life. Therefore, you give him wonderful. And because he is eating that wonderful sweet, one day he will come to your temple and become wonderful. Therefore, it is simply wonderful. So go on distributing the simply wonderful. Your philosophy is simply wonderful. Your prasadam is simply wonderful. You are simply wonderful. And your Krishna is simply wonderful. The whole process is simply wonderful. Krishna acts wonderfully and it is acting wonderfully. Who can deny it? Kirtananda Maharaj, Prabhupada is simply wonderful.
It's a very interesting this thing of words, how Prabhupada actually uses the word simply wonderful in so many places. You can read that once again, Master. Nandakishore asked.
Yes, Prabhu. Nandakishore asked, what happens to a person out on the street if we just give him one simply wonderful or some prasadam? Prabhupada, then it is wonderful, simply wonderful. The devotees laughed. He has not tasted such wonderful sweet in his life. Therefore, you give him wonderful. And because he is eating that wonderful sweet, one day he will come to your temple and become wonderful. Therefore, it is simply wonderful. So go on distributing the simply wonderful. Your philosophy is simply wonderful. Your prasadam is simply wonderful. You are simply wonderful. And your Krishna is simply wonderful. The whole process is simply wonderful. Krishna acts wonderfully and it is acting wonderfully. Who can deny it? Kirtananda Maharaj, Prabhupada is simply wonderful. While Prabhupada continued in New York, poised to leave for London in a few days, his secretary mentioned that many US centers were still vying for his presence. Prabhupada casually remarked that if any center could arrange a good lecture program and pay his travel expenses plus $1,000, then he would go there before leaving for London. Hearing this, the devotees in Gainesville, Florida, determined to meet Prabhupada's transcendental challenge. The temple president, Hridayananda, assigned an uninitiated devotee, David Lieberman, to find a sponsor at the University of Florida willing to pay $1,000 for Prabhupada to come and speak. David visited every student organization on campus until he found a donor. Prabhupada agreed to come, even though his secretary informed him that the flight would lay over 2 hours in Atlanta and then continue to Jacksonville, a 1.5 hour ride from Gainesville. Atlanta, July 29, 1971. The 10 residents of the recently opened Atlanta temple arranged to receive Prabhupada during his layover at the Atlanta airport. They prepared a large feast and decorated the Eastern Airlines VIP lounge with fruits, flowers, and garlands. Bilogal. Although Srila Prabhupada was not big physically, he immediately captured the consciousness of the entire Atlanta airport when he entered. Everyone was watching as he walked with his head held high, his cane moving gracefully with every step. The airport is one of the busiest in the country, but everyone who saw Prabhupada looked at him in amazement. Airport officials voluntarily began clearing a path for Prabhupada to walk. But what was even more amazing was that he was so submissive to such insignificant disciples as we. Prabhupada entered the VIP lounge with his disciples and about 20 Indian guests. Confronting the portable Vyasasan atop a marble table, Prabhupada declined the seat. Prabhupada declined. The seat seemed unsteady, but the devotees assured him that it was sturdy. So Prabhupada climbed up, sat down, and began leading a kirtan. After speaking for about 15 minutes, Prabhupada concluded his lecture. This is not sentimental chanting, but it is based on the soundest philosophy, Vedic literature. We have got so many books, and you can buy them in our bookstore. Where is the bookstore? There was a long pause. The devotees had remembered fruits, flowers, the chair, the feast, invitations to the Indians, but they had forgotten Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada continued to wait for an answer to his question until finally the senior disciple, Janamejaya, replied, Prabhupada, we usually have a bookstore. Was all Prabhupada said. Again, a long silence. So, Prabhupada said, looking to the audience, any questions? Prabhupada chatted with the Indians, asking their names and where they were from in India. Most of them were young men with families and treated him respectfully like a grandfather or a revered Swami. One Indian man, about 35, mentioned that he was getting his PhD in biology. Oh, biology, Prabhupada said. Poor frogs. Everyone in the lounge except the biologist burst into laughter. No, the biologist protested, embarrassed. Why poor frogs? Because you are killing, Prabhupada said. But it is for the advancement of knowledge, said the biologist. So it is worthwhile. It is for the advancement of knowledge. All right, said Prabhupada. If I ask you now, will you give your body for the advancement of knowledge? Everyone in the room began to laugh. Yes, I would, the man replied. But the more he protested, repeating, yes, I would, the more ridiculous he seemed, and the harder everyone laughed. How many species of life are there? Prabhupada asked. 50 million, the biologist replied. Oh, said Prabhupada, you have seen them all? No. How many have you seen? Perhaps 5,000. And you're wrong, Prabhupada said. There are 8,400,000 species of life. We have scientific knowledge from the Vedas. Bilogal. After Prabhupada took prasad, we performed a play for him. The play was The Brahmana and the Cobbler. I played Vishnu. It was terrible. I had to be Vishnu and my wife had to be Lakshmi. I was lying down as Lord Vishnu and my wife was massaging my feet. Prabhupada kept looking at me and I thought he must be thinking, who is this rascal playing Vishnu? My feeling was, this is not very good. I shouldn't be doing this. I was very embarrassed to be in front of Prabhupada like that. Jayasena was Narada Muni and he offered obeisances about 100 times throughout the play. Because Prabhupada was there, Jayasena was constantly offering obeisances to all. So, although he was playing Narada Muni, he offered obeisances to the cobbler. But some of the Indians spoke up. They were a little taken aback that Narada Muni, such a great saint, was offering obeisances to a cobbler who was ordinarily a very low class person. So at this point, Prabhupada interrupted and began to explain. Actually, he said, it is all right that Narada Muni has offered obeisances to the cobbler because the cobbler is a Vaishnava. Any Vaishnava can receive obeisances more than a Brahmana. He continued narrating the play. He told the story and we continued acting. It was ecstatic. As Prabhupada was leaving the lounge to board his flight for Jacksonville, a lady in a wheelchair, the mother of one of the devotees in Atlanta, raised herself up and threw herself at Prabhupada's feet. With tears in her eyes, she cried out, I'm dying of cancer. Save me, save me. Srila Prabhupada bent down and put his hand over her head. That's all right, he said comfortingly. That is all right. As Prabhupada, garlanded with red roses and magnolias, walked down the corridor towards his plane, the devotees thought that Prabhupada appeared majestic like a king. He emanated a golden effulgence and he seemed powerful yet humble. The devotees felt spiritual strength and pledged to follow Prabhupada's teachings. They last glimpsed him walking across the airfield toward the small plane that would take him to Jacksonville. His saffron silk dhoti and kurta blowing in the breeze, he turned to them and waved. Gainesville, July 29, 1971. Srila Prabhupada asked how fast the car was going and how long it would take them to get to Gainesville. 65 miles per hour, the driver said. It would take an hour and a half. Prabhupada observed the scenery along the highway, pine forests, marshes, exotic birds, an occasional armadillo foraging near the highway. Lotuses and lilies grew wild in the canals along the roadside, and bright sunshine warmed the clear air. Gainesville was a side trip for Prabhupada, a special day of preaching. He had left Shyam Sundar, his secretary, in New York and brought with him only Arvinda, his servant. He had come for a day to bring the mercy of Lord Caitanya to yet another city. When the devotees had picked him up at the airport, he had appeared grave, but on catching sight of the devotees, he had smiled wonderfully. And then, turning to Hridayananda, he had asked, which way? He was like a transcendental fighter, asking to be pointed toward the battle, toward the battle. Prabhupada walked along a flower-sprinkled pathway and into the temple, a rented house near the University of Florida campus. In the temple room, he stood a moment, studying a crude but sincerely executed painting of Lord Chaitanya and his associates. Hridayananda asked Prabhupada if he would like to rest, and he nodded. While the devotees performed kirtan, Prabhupada retired to his room, returning later to sit on the large blue velvet Vyasasan in the small temple room. In addition to Prabhupada's disciples from Gainesville, Miami, Tallahassee, and New Orleans, many university students and other guests were also present. It is so nice to see so many young boys and girls here, Srila Prabhupada began, in this remote corner of the world, so far away from the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada lectured about the saving grace of chanting the holy name of the Lord. One of his disciples, he said, had been present when his mother was dying. Because he had been telling her about Krishna and Hare Krishna, she said to her son in her last words, where is your Krishna? Is he here now? And then she died. For her uttering the holy name and thinking of Krishna, Prabhupada said she would go to the spiritual world. After Prabhupada finished his talk, a girl reporter from the university newspaper raised her hand. I see almost all young people here, she said. Why is that? Prabhupada replied with a question. Why are there so many young people in the university? The girl reflected a moment. Well, I guess that is the age for education. Yes, Prabhupada said. So this is the age for Krishna consciousness. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. The engagement for which Prabhupada had come and for which the University of Florida was paying $1,000 was to be that afternoon on campus at the Plaza of the Americas. When Prabhupada arrived, several hundred students were gathered near the temporary stage, sitting casually on the grass, lounging beneath the fragrant magnolia trees. The sky was overcast and rain threatened. As more students gathered, the crowd grew to 500. Then, just as Prabhupada was about to speak, a light drizzle began to fall, and Hridayananda came on stage to hold an umbrella over Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, sitting on his Vyasasan, said softly into the microphone, "Someone is smoking," and the students politely extinguished their cigarettes. No sooner did Prabhupada begin his lecture, however, than a dog started yapping. Prabhupada paused. "Who's that dog?" he asked. When the dog persisted, Srila Prabhupada said, he also wants to he also wants to talk. Finally the barking stopped, and so did the rain. But Hridayananda continued to hold the umbrella over Prabhupada's head. While riding in the car back to the temple, Prabhupada asked to hear the tape recording of his lecture. When he heard the dog barking at the beginning of his talk, he laughed. "Prabhupada," Hridayananda said, "your lecture was wonderful. Everyone liked it. The students liked it, the devotees liked it, the professors liked it." "All right," Prabhupada said. "Hare Krishna." Srila Prabhupada's day of preaching was not over yet. Next was an evening television interview. The interviewer had done some preparatory reading, and he introduced Srila Prabhupada by first describing who Krishna was according to Vedic literature and how Srila Prabhupada was in the disciplic succession from Lord Caitanya. When the interviewer asked Prabhupada for an introductory statement, Prabhupada explained, "The Krishna consciousness movement is trying to invoke in all people the original consciousness that we are a part and parcel of Krishna." When the interviewer asked Prabhupada, "Who is your spiritual master?" Prabhupada lowered his head humbly and stated the full name of his Guru Maharaj, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada. The interviewer, however, seemed bent on controversy. "In what way, sir, may I ask, did you think and do you think right now that the teaching of love of God that you are preaching is different and perhaps better than the teachings of love of God that were being conducted in this country and have been conducted in the rest of the world for centuries?" Srila Prabhupada, "This teaching is the most authorized. That is a fact. We are following in the footsteps of Lord Caitanya. He is accepted by us according to the authority of Vedic religion to be personally Krishna himself. For example, you are the expert in this establishment. If someone is doing something under your guidance, and if you personally teach him, do like this, that is very authorized." So when Lord Chaitanya taught God consciousness, God himself was teaching. Prabhupada had answered positively, avoiding the sectarian dispute the interviewer had invited. Yet, repeatedly, the interviewer tried to involve him in a controversy. He seemed to want Prabhupada to appear arrogant, sectarian, and anti American. Prabhupada, however, insisted he was not opposed to any other religion and that anyone in the world could chant the name of God as it appeared in his religion. Interviewer, but there must have been an element of dissatisfaction on your part with the way Godhead was being professed in this part of the world before you came. Otherwise, there would have been no sense in your being here. Srila Prabhupada, it is not just this part of the world. Practically every part of the world has very little interest in God. They have more interest in dogs. Prabhupada's answers were strong and philosophically strong. The interviewer, trying his professional best, again attempted to find some fault. Interviewer, it seems to me, sir, as interpreted in your writings, that there is a very high emphasis placed on the relationship between the individual and God. Srila Prabhupada, yes, that is found everywhere. Interviewer, yes, but you place more emphasis on that relationship than on the relationship between one individual and another. Am I right in that? Srila Prabhupada, we have to establish, first of all, our lost relationship with God. Then we can understand what is our relationship between one individual and another. If the central point is missing, then there is practically no relation. You are an American and another is an American, and both of you feel American nationality because the center is America. So, unless you understand God, you cannot understand who I am, nor can I understand who you are. Interviewer, I think that in this part of the world, in the Western world, we place a great deal of emphasis on religion in the ways it gets one man to deal with another man, the ethic of religion. Now, in Krishna consciousness movement, Prabhupada said, we are not concerned how one man deals with another man. Interviewer, isn't that part of your Krishna consciousness movement? Srila Prabhupada, no, this is not important because we know as soon as one knows how to deal with God, he will automatically deal very nicely with others. Interviewer, but let us take the Christian religion for example. You know the Ten Commandments? There is a heavy emphasis in the Ten Commandments on the relationships between one human being and another. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. You know that sort of thing? Srila Prabhupada. But I say that Jesus Christ never said and never meant that thou shalt not kill refers only to human beings. Where is that evidence? Jesus Christ never said that thou shalt not kill refers only to human beings. Thou shalt not kill any animal. Interviewer, any life? Srila Prabhupada, any life. That is religion. Interviewer, it has never been interpreted that way. Srila Prabhupada, you have interpreted it differently. But he said, thou shalt not kill. He never said, thou shalt not kill amongst human beings. Why do you interpret it that way? Prabhupada had given the TV interviewer the very thing he was after, controversy. But because it was not desirable controversy, the interviewer promptly dropped it. Instead, he asked Prabhupada how one could recognize a true follower of Krishna consciousness by his behavior. He'd be a perfect gentleman, Prabhupada said. That's all. Therefore, I prohibit my disciples to eat meat. Interviewer, to eat meat? Srila Prabhupada, yes. And therefore, I prohibit illicit sex. Therefore, I prohibit intoxication. They do not even smoke. What to speak of other intoxication? When Prabhupada said that whoever observed these four rules would become a perfect gentleman, the interviewer asked whether there was a place for women in the religion. Prabhupada replied that women and men had the same rights and followed the same principles. The interviewer asked whether Prabhupada was encouraged or discouraged, and Prabhupada said he was encouraged because so many devotees were joining. The interviewer doubted that many were joining, since out of 200 million Americans, only 24 devotees were present in the TV studio. When you sell diamonds, Prabhupada replied, you cannot expect that everyone will purchase. As a final question, the interviewer asked if Prabhupada had any major complaints about American society. Srila Prabhupada, I have no complaint. These boys and girls are very nice. I'm rather encouraged that these boys and girls are hankering after something nice. They are frustrated. So now, since they have the best thing, they are coming. The interviewer asked Srila Prabhupada and his followers to chant Hare Krishna, and within half a minute, they were off the air. The hot studio lights went out, and the engineers started talking among themselves. The interviewer bid Srila Prabhupada a polite farewell. He had no intention of continuing their talk, but Srila Prabhupada continued preaching. On camera or off camera made no difference to him. He saw the interviewer not merely as a television personality, but as someone to receive Krishna's mercy. The two had been sitting very closely for the interview. And Prabhupada now leaned toward the interviewer and said, let me ask you one question. If you have some disease and you want to cure this disease, what is the best way to go about it? By asking a friend or by going to a medical doctor and asking how to cure this disease? Would you go to a friend? The man replied, yes. Prabhupada shook his head. You would go to a friend? Again the man said, yes. The interviewer was not concentrating, so Prabhupada patiently repeated his example. Try to understand, he said. If you have some disease, then you would go to a medical doctor, or would you go to a friend? The man could not grasp the point, so Prabhupada answered, no, you would not go to a friend, you would go to a physician, one who knows the answer. That is the spiritual master. They talked a while longer, and finally Prabhupada and the devotees left. It was almost midnight, and Prabhupada went to his room. When he had first arrived in Gainesville, he had agreed to initiate the 5 eligible candidates and had even taken their japa beads. But now the day had passed, there had been no initiation, and Prabhupada still had 5 strands of beads. Joseph and Sam, who had come all the way from New Orleans, and David Lieberman with his wife Adrian, Adrian and a Gainesville boy named Gary, were all in anxiety. They had stayed up talking among themselves, wondering whether Srila Prabhupada would hold an initiation ceremony in the morning before he left. Aravinda told them there would be no time for a ceremony in the morning, but that he would ask Srila Prabhupada whether they could have their beads back. He went to Prabhupada's room, leaving the devotees to sit and talk about Srila Prabhupada. When Aravinda returned, he surprised everyone by announcing, Prabhupada is going to give you your beads now. He is going to give you your initiation in his room. The devotees excitedly hurried to Srila Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada sat on his bed. He wore no shirt, only his dhoti, which he had pushed up high on his thighs and tucked under himself, like a loincloth or gamcha. His body was smooth and glowing. The devotees sat on the floor around his bed while he held their beads in his hand and chanted. Prabhupada handed Gary his beads. So, your name is now Dharmadasa. This means one who is a strict follower of all religious principles, dharma. I was actually very nervous and I was practically shaking because I was afraid I would do something wrong in front of Srila Prabhupada. I was so nervous practically I couldn't even hear properly. But I was very happy to have been accepted by Srila Prabhupada. I knew, of course, there was no question of ever leaving the movement now. I never wanted to leave anyway, but now this was official. Even if I had considered it before, now there was no question of it. Then there was Joseph from New Orleans. What is his name? Prabhupada asked Aravinda. Aravinda read from a sheet, Bhagavata Dasa. Prabhupada smiled and said, oh, Bhagavata Dasa, very good. There are 2 things. There is the book Bhagavata, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavad Gita, and the person Bhagavata, who follows perfectly those teachings. He is a living manifestation of the book Bhagavata, and you are Bhagavata Dasa. That means you are the servant of the book Bhagavata and the person Bhagavata. Bhagavata. I always wanted a name that meant I was the servant of the Guru. So when I heard this, I was very happy. Prabhupada started to hand me my beads, but then he pulled them back and asked, and what are the 4 regulative principles? So I told him, and he said, very good. Then he went to hand me my beads again, but again he pulled them back. He asked, how many rounds do you chant? I was very proud because I had been chanting 20 rounds a day for about 5 months. So I sat up real straight and said, you're supposed to chant 16 rounds a day, Srila Prabhupada, but I chant 20. Srila Prabhupada just turned away from me and said, that's all right. It was like he was saying, don't get puffed up. Then he turned to me and said, here are your beads. Handing Dev his beads, Prabhupada said, your name is Amarendra. This means the best of the immortals. He named Adrian Gayatri Dasi and Sam Subrata. When Subrata stood and Prabhupada noticed she was not wearing neck beads, he withheld the chanting beads and said, you have no neck beads? Where are your neck beads? Prabhupada turned to Bhagavata Dasa. You also have no neck beads? Bhagavata thought that Prabhupada was going to take his chanting beads back, so here he hid them against his stomach. Then Prabhupada turned to the senior devotees in the room, criticizing. What is the matter with you? He said sternly. You are leaders and you don't know these things? Don't you know that you must put neck beads in giving initiation? The senior devotees were frightened by Prabhupada's anger. We are sorry, Prabhupada, someone said. Tomorrow, for the fire yajna, they will have neck beads. Yes, Prabhupada said, you cannot do the fire yajna without neck beads. They must have neck beads. Although it was midnight, Prabhupada asked if the devotees had any questions. Bhagavatadasa raised his hand. How is it that we are on a transcendental platform, but sometimes we are affected by the three modes of material nature? It is just like you are on a boat, Prabhupada replied. If you are on a boat, then I cannot say you are not on the boat. Is it not? So you are on the transcendental boat. Therefore, you are on the transcendental platform. You cannot say that you are not, but the waves are coming and they are rocking the boat. Prabhupada gestured with his hands like a boat rocking. So the waves of material nature are coming, he continued, and they are rocking the boat. But when you become an expert boatman, then even the greatest storm, you can stay steady and steer the boat, and it will not rock you. Well, how does one become an expert boatman? Bhagavata asked. You become expert, Prabhupada replied, by becoming enthusiastic, sincere, confident, determined, and patient. Seeing Bhagavata's anxious face, Prabhupada added, and you must be patient. Everything will come in due course. Sitting informally on the bed in his abbreviated dhoti, Prabhupada had answered Bhagavata's questions in such a way as to fully satisfy all the devotees. The devotees were already satisfied just to be with Prabhupada, but by his answers to their questions, not only they, but all devotees could take encouragement and be satisfied. They would tell the others what he had said, and everyone would cherish these instructions of Srila Prabhupada. Amarendra also had a question. Amarendra was intense and impassioned, and so was his inquiry. Before becoming a devotee, he had been a leader of campus radicals. Now he wanted to bring that same intensity to bear in spreading Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, Amarendra asked, how can we make them take to this Krishna consciousness? What can we say when we go to preach to people? What can we say that we will make them take it? His voice was heavy and forceful, demanding action. You simply ask them to please chant Hare Krishna, Prabhupada replied. Whether they take or not, that is their business. That is between them and Krishna. But you have done your business. You have done your duty for Krishna by simply asking them, please chant Hare Krishna. How do we take our minds away from Maya and bring them to Krishna? Radha Vallabha asked. You must drag the mind, Prabhupada said. You must drag the mind back to the sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And again he repeated, you must drag the mind back to the sound vibration. All right, Prabhupada looked around. You are satisfied now? The devotees responded, yes, Srila Prabhupada, thank you very much. Then they all left. It had been the greatest day and night of their lives. They all agreed, and they would never forget it. While Prabhupada rode to the Jacksonville airport in a car with a few disciples, the other devotees followed in their van, bringing the Vyasasana from the temple for Prabhupada to use at the airport. Srila Prabhupada closed his eyes and rested as he rode, and the devotees in the back seat of his car ate the remnants of his prasadam. Hridayananda, it was my idea to bring Prabhupada's Vyasasana to the airport. I was thinking, how can my spiritual master sit in the same seat that karmis sit on? It just seemed impossible. How could Prabhupada put his lotus body? How could he sit on the same seat as the karmis? I was very agitated by that. Amarendra had built the Vyasasana and he used to build everything like a tank. The Vyasasana must have weighed several hundred pounds. It took 4 or 5 devotees to carry it. So Prabhupada arrived first and the Vyasasana wasn't there. By the time he got to his boarding gate and the Vyasasana still wasn't there, I was in anxiety because I didn't want him to sit in a regular seat. I thought it would be a great offense on my part. Then, as I looked down the long, long airport corridor, I saw 6 brahmacharis, half of them without their shoes on, lugging Prabhupada's Vyasasan down the corridor. It was such an absurd scene. Prabhupada just stood there, looking in disbelief and disgust, and finally several sweating, groaning brahmacharis came and dropped the Vyasasan down in front of Prabhupada. Prabhupada just looked at it with disdain, walked past it, and sat down in the ordinary seat. While most of the devotees sat at Prabhupada's feet chanting the Guru Ashtaka prayers to the spiritual master, Hridayananda was preaching to the people who were standing and watching the spectacle. He had some of Srila Prabhupada's books and he was trying to distribute them. Prabhupada gave more attention to this preaching than to the devotees seated at his feet. Having visited half a dozen cities in a little more than a month's time, Srila Prabhupada was planning next to visit London. Clearly, his field had become the entire world, and his traveling was the practical enactment of his conviction that Krishna consciousness should be given to people everywhere. By Prabhupada's wide traveling and bold preaching, the old idea that the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna were only for the Hindus had become an anachronism, a prejudice. Barriers of race, religion, nation, sex, class, all were now down. The Hindu saying that a Swami should not cross the ocean had become a superstition, intended perhaps to protect lesser Swamis, but certainly never to restrict the message of the absolute truth from being spread. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's expressed desire was that in every town and village of the world, his name be heard, and no Vedic injunction could prohibit that. Of course, the Vedic literatures advised a devotee to live in a secluded place and avoid worldly men and women, and they advised a devotee not to disturb the minds of innocent persons or preach to the faithless. According to one Vedic injunction, a devotee should not even see the face of a non believer. Such rules and regulations, however, intended mainly for the protection and purification of the neophytes, were superseded by the stalwart Acharya, acting on the higher principle of compassion. And in support of that higher principle, Lord Krishna had promised, "My devotee shall never be vanquished." The surrendered preacher, taking up Lord Chaitanya's highest order, would be immunized against contamination, despite regular contact with worldly persons. Even at the risk of his own spiritual life, the preacher approached worldly people, and in return, Krishna protected him. Prabhupada was merciful to everyone, everywhere. Therefore, he was Jagat Guru, the spiritual master for the entire world. To become Jagat Guru didn't mean to claim that one was better than everyone else or that he was the best Guru in the world. Jagat Guru meant that, like Narada Muni, a preacher of Krishna consciousness, went everywhere, preached everywhere, and had disciples everywhere. And Srila Prabhupada did that. On arriving at one US airport, Srila Prabhupada had mentioned that yogis had formerly traveled in 3 different ways: by flying carpet, by pigeons, and by mantra. Then why have you come today on American Airlines? The reporter had challenged. Just to be one with you, Srila Prabhupada had said, smiling. But that Prabhupada had come just by jet instead of by some extraordinary mystic power was actually no less miraculous. The miracle was that he was always traveling and that wherever he went, he spoke the message of Krishna consciousness, created faith in the faithless, and transformed the low-grade persons of Kali Yuga into pure Vaishnavas. Srila Prabhupada, in addition to his selfless, compassionate traveling, was also offering volumes of transcendental literature. His disciples in 65 centers around the world were gratefully accepting their role of assisting him, assuring him that they were able to preach to the people in their areas and that he should feel confident to go on opening new frontiers of Krishna consciousness and presenting more and more transcendental literature. His disciples especially wanted him to have time for translating Srimad Bhagavatam because he had told them that that was his desire. Often he said that if he could simply spend time translating Srimad Bhagavatam, he would stop traveling. He could not stop traveling for very long, however. Even if he found enough peace and a suitable place for concentrating on the Bhagavatam, duty would call. Again, he would have to travel to see new people, to introduce Sankirtan in the new place, to ensure that his movement was progressing smoothly. Prabhupada, therefore, had developed a routine of translating Srimad Bhagavatam anywhere he went for at least a few hours a day. He had a briefcase with Sanskrit Bhagavatams and commentaries and a suitcase with a dictating machine. Wherever he was, he would rise in the middle of the night, sit at his desk with a dictating machine and Sanskrit and Bengali volumes, and take up where he had left off, translating the verses into English and composing his Bhaktivedanta purports. Thus, his busy traveling and his translating were able to go on simultaneously.
So we come to the end of that chapter. I have some things to say. I mean, quite a few things to say. One is that we see how traditionally sannyasis would never travel outside the country, especially overseas. But here is explained how the principle of compassion overrides every other principle. And Srila Prabhupada was driven by that compassion. So, driven by that compassion, he went across the seas at great personal hardship. And one lecture, Prabhupada says, you cannot imagine how difficult it was with that heart attack. So the difficulties of unimaginable magnitude Prabhupada had to face. Then staying alone in New York, what is it? After he reached America, what is the first place? Butler, Pennsylvania. So there you can see how when he stays in the house of Sally Agarwal, and then he goes to YMCA, and then the Bowery. So there are a lot of hardships that Prabhupada went through, unimaginable for a common man. First of all, Prabhupada has left Vrindavan. Vrindavan is the place where the devotees are, and he's desolate, within quotes. Let me use the word, within quotes, desolate in the streets of America. Nobody to help him. But Prabhupada is so internally focused on the mission of his spiritual master, driven by compassion. Para dukkha dukhi. So this is the outstanding characteristic of a Vaishnava. He's extremely compassionate upon the fallen souls. If not for him, where would we be? We would not even be sitting here together and discussing this Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, the nectar of the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. So the scale of what Prabhupada has done is unimaginable. At an advanced age, traveling across the sea with heart attack and triumphantly establishing Krishna consciousness across the whole world. And there is that sense of urgency, the sense of importance in his words, in his purports, in his lectures, everywhere. It's just inescapable that this material world is a place of birth, death, old age, disease, and these are really the miseries of life. Nobody actually thinks of these miseries of life when they're living, but actually it's a very dangerous life. As Prabhupada would say, material world is a condemned place. How many of us, even after coming to Krishna consciousness, think of the material world as a condemned place? Therefore, we need to dive into the Bhaktivedanta purports, because we have to see the world through the eyes of the Acharya. And then when we see the world through the eyes of the Acharya, we see how dangerous it is. And when we see how dangerous it is, we feel compassionate towards those who have not been saved. So then our heart gets drawn to people who are not saved. So therefore, Krishna himself considers this activity of giving out Krishna consciousness to others as the prime activity for all devotees. He says, no one is more dear to me than one who gives out, because when we give out Krishna consciousness, we are saving people from unimaginable, unterminable misery. It is finally they're getting free after millions and billions and trillions of life in this material world. But if we have to really do that, we should be selfless. We should be selfless. It is not that, okay, Krishna consciousness there, we just lead some kind of an unconscious kind of life. Okay, we chant, we read 16 rounds and do something. No, we have to be steeped in the Bhaktivedanta purports. We have to be steeped in the Bhaktivedanta purports, because the Bhaktivedanta purports will show us the state of the world, the beauty of Krishna consciousness, all of it. At one shot, it can show us. So that can drive us to reach out to the conditioned souls and give them Krishna consciousness. It helps us to be fixed in Krishna consciousness, and it helps us to give out Krishna consciousness to others. Now, in his talk with Bhagavata Prabhu, it's interesting that there in these question answers, Prabhupada actually answers a lot of interesting and a very relevant question. For example, Prabhupada says, how does one, Bhagavata asks, how does one become an expert boatman? You become expert, Prabhupada replied, by becoming enthusiastic, sincere, confident, determined, and patient. So look at the words: enthusiastic, sincere, confident, determined, and patient. And Prabhupada finally concludes, and you must be patient. Everything will come in due course. We just have to hang in there by practicing our Krishna consciousness and giving out Krishna consciousness to others. Even in Krishna consciousness, we can become obsessed with what is happening to our spiritual life, how are we materially placed, how are we spiritually placed, all these things. This is not what we are supposed to be thinking. We're not supposed to be thinking even about, in terms of where am I placed now? Of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about introspection, but that introspection is like Prahlad Maharaj speaks about when you decorate yourself, you don't have to decorate the image in the mirror separately. So if we just try to please Krishna, we don't have to evaluate where we are. Of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about evaluation. The evaluation refers to how much attentively am I hearing the holy names? How much attentively am I hearing the Bhagavatam? How much attentively am I hearing the Caitanya Charitamrita? How much enthusiastically am I preaching? How much sincerely am I doing it? How confidently I'm doing it? How determinedly I'm doing it? And how patiently I'm doing it? We only think for Krishna. Krishna thinks for us. We think for Krishna and Krishna thinks for us. This is what the Krishna consciousness movement is all about. That material life means we think about ourselves. Krishna consciousness has come to completely overturn that concept and think in terms of others. Think in terms of others. And we can only think in terms of others genuinely when we understand that we have nothing to gain in this material world, nothing to lose in this material world. Everybody is an identical situation in this material world. What do I mean by identical situation in this material world? When we are born, we come with nothing. When we are going, we go with nothing. So, I remember Bhaktivinoda Maharaj once wrote a poem. I, me, mine, here he'll sit and pine. Yesterday in the tomb, yesterday in the womb, tomorrow in the tomb. Still he'll say, I, me, mine. So the idea is that we somehow or the other make the world revolve around us, our life, our concerns, our family, all these different things, So we don't come with anything, we don't go with anything. So none of us in this material world are more privileged than anybody else. And none of us are more privileged or less privileged than anybody else. Everybody is in an identical state. That's it. Everybody is born with a death sentence. But do we think like that? The Bhagavatam teaches us with every passing sunrise, the duration of life is being decreased by the sun. This is the reality. So have we taken full advantage of Krishna consciousness today? This is what our focus should be. Are we attentively hearing the holy names? Are we attentively hearing the Bhagavatam? Are we preaching? This is our life. This is our life. And this is what Prabhupada came to teach. And his life is an example of that. 24 hours, his life is active in Krishna service. We do work for Krishna and Krishna does the rest. Like Prabhupada gives the example of this student's mother. The student was doing very nice activity in Krishna consciousness. So his mother died by asking, where is Krishna? Is he here now? Similarly, there's another lady who's dying of cancer who comes and falls at Prabhupada's feet. And Prabhupada says it's all right because her son is Krishna conscious. So everything Krishna will take care. So that consciousness that Prabhupada brought us is, we are meant to be Krishna conscious, not how much advancement we are making Krishna consciousness. We are only thinking in terms of, oh, I have to serve Krishna more and more. I take shelter more and more of Krishna. That's it. We are not thinking of how much shortcomings we are and this and that, and we are not trying to accomplish anything. We are trying to purely love God. This is what the Krishna conscious movement is. And you can see Prabhupada is really trying to give out Krishna consciousness. He goes to Gainesville, although it is a little bit of a detour for him. He goes with only his servant and even initiates devotees there. Prabhupada does not lose any opportunity, even a single opportunity, he does not lose to preach. And that is what makes him very, very dear to Krishna. So followers of Prabhupada means for us, preaching is our lifeline. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, only a person who's alive can preach. A dead man cannot preach. So for us, the members of the Krishna conscious movement, the Sarasvatas, the followers of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, we have to preach. I mean, recently a devotee was telling me how in Vrindavan, there are so many devotees. There are several devotees who are so much focused on their sadhana and very little preaching. So this is not our movement. We are not trying to somehow or the other attain Radha Kund or Manjari Baba. No, we are interested in pleasing Srila Prabhupada. That's it. We are not interested in anything else. This is the mood of pure devotional service. Whatever pleases Prabhupada, we will do it. This is our mood. Okay. Any thoughts, questions, reflections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. A quick question, Prabhu. And of course, I 100% agree with everything you said, in particular with Prabhupada's compassion. But do you think the overriding factor was that Prabhupada's compassion brought him to the West, or was it that his instructions to his Guru Maharaj's instructions was the overriding factor? Of course, compassion is there, 100%, not denying. But what was the overriding principle that you think was driving Prabhupada?
The Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj's order was the embodiment of the compassion principle. No? I mean, it is a personification of the compassion principle. All the followers of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu are personified compassion. They are the vigraha of compassion. That is the essential characteristic of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers. That they see, God is never anxious, but God as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is anxious. So why? Because he's seeing that the conditioned souls are suffering. That is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's anxiety. How shall I deliver them? Therefore, all the acharyas in our line are embodiments of that compassion towards fallen conditioned souls. So as Prabhupada would say, simply wonderful, that past. So like that, Prabhupada's spiritual master's instruction was driven by compassion. Prabhupada's taking it up was driven by compassion. Prabhupada's going to the West was driven by compassion. Prabhupada, everything that Prabhupada did was driven by compassion. Not convincing enough?
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Mataji. Are you still in Mayapur?
Yeah. Yes, Mataji. Yes, Prabhu. I am leaving tomorrow.
Okay. What time?
Maybe after post lunch or something.
Okay.
Around 1 o'clock. Like that.
I'll try to meet you tomorrow on the temple. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Prabhu, just my question was this: now you said that our movement is to please Prabhupada and not to do our personal sadhana or something to affect him. But the many of Prabhupada's disciples, or nowadays also, many people, they stay in Dham only. Either it is Vrindavan or in Mayapur. generally they purchase land or they make their residence as either Vrindavan or Mayapur. So I don't know for whether it is for preaching purpose or for their personal this one. So how you can say that means what is your take on that? Like why they are doing that way?
They,
Then if they are
Vayapur and
really
become hub of preaching, actually, so much preaching happens in Vrindavan and Mayapur. In Mayapur also there are several senior proper disciples who are involved with Harinam, book distribution. So I mean Jeevanath Prabhu is involved with Harinam, Kripanidhi Prabhu is involved with book distribution. So I there is generally the mood, that the mood of retirement is generally not there, at least in Mayapur as far as I'm concerned. Vrindavan, I don't know, but Vrindavan also we had Vishal Prabhu who would, even when you're sitting in middle of a Bhagavatam class, he would come and sell a book to you. So Raivi Shakti Mataji is distributing books there. So generally, everybody is involved with preaching. At least most are involved with preaching in some way or the other.
I think, but it is more necessary in other places
No.
than these dhams.
No. How do you say that? How do you say it's more important than the dham and other? Because Prabhupada said that if you're in the dham, you don't have to go anywhere. People will come and you can preach to them. Why are these centers there for us? So people to come and so that we can preach to them, not that they come and see the deity and go away. No, you're supposed to preach to them. You're supposed to preach to them, make them Krishna conscious. You're giving them Krishna consciousness just by establishing a nice center. That's okay. But you need to preach to them, cultivate them. Cultivate them may not be on a daily basis, but connect them with devotees. You're supposed to inspire them to take up Krishna consciousness. That is the purpose of living in the holy dham, to make one's life perfect and help others. So we are supposed to inspire others in Krishna consciousness.
Okay.
I'm not saying that there may not be anybody who, sometimes Prabhupada also said if you have done full of preaching in your life, then you can come to Vrindavan or Mayapur and just hear and chant the holy names. That is because they have done all their lives, and so this is also Shravanam Kirtan is also service. But yeah, generally those have to be seen on a case-to-case basis. But even then, there's nothing like simply reading and reading. People, you always bump into people in the temple and other places, so then you give out some Krishna consciousness to them. You can't just, even preaching to the devotees is also preaching. It's not that only non-devotees we have to preach to. Because Prabhupada would say, boil the milk. So where will the devotees, who will preach to our devotees? Many devotees are taken to Krishna consciousness. We need to preach to the devotees also.
Yes, that is very important.
In fact, that's a very important activity, to preach to the devotees so that they become steady in Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
Any other thoughts, reflections, questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next chapter. This is the last chapter in this particular book, volume 4. It's called Every Town and Village.
Shall we start, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji, please go ahead.
Chapter 36, In Every Town and Village. London, August 1971. From Florida, this remote corner of the world, Prabhupada returned to New York and after 3 days flew to London. There he became ill. On August 14th, he wrote to Tamal Krishna, I am sick here since the last 4 days. There is no sunshine. Almost always there is darkness and rain. So it has affected my health because I'm already rheumatic. Prabhupada said he wanted to retire from traveling and management. This body is old, it is giving warning. But he didn't have sufficient confidence that his leading managers could push on without his pushing them. Prabhupada complained to his secretary, Shyam Sundar, criticizing him and other zonal secretaries for not producing and distributing his books on a large scale. Why are there no books? Prabhupada demanded, and Shyam Sundar cringed, unable to give a satisfactory answer. Shamsundar said he would immediately write to his god brothers on the Bhaktivedanta Trust. Why have a book trust? Prabhupada argued. What have they done? There is no stock of big books. There are no literatures in foreign languages after years of promises and plans. Why hasn't the unabridged Bhagavad Gita as it has been printed yet? So there's a note here saying big book refers to teachings of Lord Caitanya, Nectar of Devotion, Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, Shamsundar replied, because they no, it is your responsibility, Prabhupada yelled. Why haven't you done it? Prabhupada chastised his GBC secretaries around the world through the one secretary before him. The GBC's duties were to see that Prabhupada's books were always in stock, that Back to Godhead magazine was being published regularly, that accounts were being paid regularly, and that the devotional life in the temples was healthy. Our business is how to expand, said Prabhupada, how to introduce Krishna consciousness into educational circles. Let any philosopher, scientist, or educationist come. We have got enough stock, but the sleeping, this leisurely work will not do. They can learn activity from an old man like me because my determination is like this. If I die working, it is a great credit. Just like a marshal, if he dies on the battlefield, it is his credit. Arjuna was told, even if you die, you are still the gainer. The slow process of printing is the most condemned position. Why should I go on translating when you cannot print? You say retire and translate, but why should I translate? No one will ever see it. I can give you volumes. There is Dainipan who will print in Japan on credit. So why don't you print? Always, it is to be done, it is to be done. That's all. The big men complaining. Either he goes or I go. This restlessness, this diversion has to stop. When the father is providing, it is the duty of the son to serve. I'm the father, I'm giving you everything. Why don't you serve me by printing these books? If one book only is read and understood, that is sufficient to make him Krishna conscious. Don't you see how important it is? They are always asking me, is such and such a book bona fide? They can't even take the time to read one of my books. And still they ask for one of my god brothers' books. How will things go on? First canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is not even edited or corrected. What to speak of printed? So many books unprinted. So tell them, from the book fund, not a farthing should be for eating. One day, Advaita, the manager of ISKCON Press, called from New York and with some good news. In a week, they would be sending Dainipan the negatives for 5 big books. ISKCON Press had also sent a shipment of the German Ishopanishad to Europe, and other foreign language books were forthcoming. Prabhupada was pleased, and Shamsundar informed his god brothers. Needless to say, this was just the medicine required to treat Prabhupada's slackening faith in us. Things are looking up, but still Prabhupada encourages us to write up these reports and get a clear all-round picture of the book situation. Although Prabhupada's health was still weak,
Total book situation. Total book situation.
Oh, okay. Although Prabhupada's health was still weak, he felt heartened to hear that books were being printed, and he continued with his translation and commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ranchor. One night, I was up very late, 1 o'clock in the morning. As I came in, I saw that Prabhupada's lights were on in his front room, and I could hear his voice speaking into the dictating machine. I came up the stairs, being as quiet as I possibly could, so Prabhupada wouldn't know that I was up so late. But as I passed his door, I couldn't resist the temptation to just stop and listen for a while. I tried looking through the keyhole, but I couldn't see anything. So I just listened to Prabhupada's voice as he was dictating Srimad Bhagavatam. Then, all of a sudden, he stopped. I suppose he was just thinking about what he was going to say next. But then I got the feeling that he knew I was out there, listening through the door. I became frightened and went up the stairs as quietly as I could, although the stairs creaked. Everyone was asleep, not only the temple, but practically the whole city of London at 1 o'clock in the morning. But Prabhupada was awake and translating. He had been speaking quietly, but with a voice of great strength and determination. All during the day, he was under pressure to organize things and see people. And yet, at night, the one time when he could have some peace and quiet, he was up dictating. In London, Prabhupada began a book on the Western philosophers, beginning with Socrates. Every morning, Shamsundar would present a synopsis of a major philosophy to Prabhupada, and for several hours, Prabhupada would discuss the philosopher's major points from the light of Krishna consciousness. Daily, Shamsundar was busy transcribing the morning discussions and preparing the next philosopher. On August 14, Srila Prabhupada observed Janmashtami, the birthday of Lord Krishna. On the next day, Prabhupada's own 75th birthday, a paperback book of collected homages by his disciples arrived. Many of the Vyasa Puja homages praised Srila Prabhupada for his extensive traveling to deliver fallen souls all over the world and for the vast scope of his merciful preaching. This year, you have been traveling to India, personally speaking and managing ISKCON and showing us the meaning of Acharya by example. And now you are traveling and inspiring the devotees and centers in the US and Europe. At Vyas Puja time, we, your intimate children, are gathered at your feet to tell you our feelings as best we can. By your blessings, we can go forth from this Vyasa Puja gathering of 1971 and all devotees together as one great ISKCON, without faction, truly perform the work with our thoughts, words, and deeds. Let us go and distribute this literature of Srila Prabhupada's Krishna's message, kindly delivered to the Western countries. Let us cooperate without ill feelings among ourselves. Let us very strictly observe all the regulative principles and stay as pure representatives. Let us celebrate pure Sankirtan and magazine distribution to please you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All your disciples pray that you remain in our presence for many years to come, and by our cooperation, you will be able to spend time writing volumes of Bhagavatam while we carry on the program and mission of your Guru Maharaj. Prabhupada's ill health continued. I was sick for 4 or 5 days. Now I am a little better, but the disease is prolonging in a different way. I cannot sleep at night more than 2 hours, and during the day, sometimes I'm feeling some dizziness. Otherwise, everything is all right. I'm chanting Hare Krishna as usual and writing my books regularly. Sham Sundar. Aravinda and I were sleeping right outside Prabhupada's room. I was on a lower bunk bed and I heard Sham Sundar. It was a really urgent sound and I woke up so hard that I hit my head on the bunk above. I ran into Prabhupada's room. As I was opening the door, he collapsed in the doorway. I caught him. He felt so light, like a little doll, and his face was grey. I took him over to his bed and thought, oh my God, what's going on? He was shivering. I turned the electric heater way up and put it next to his bed. I covered him with a lot of blankets and waited. He was just still. His eyes were closed. Finally, he said, Sham Sundar, go get me some black pepper. He described how to make a black pepper paste. Rub it on my forehead, he said. So I ran down to the kitchen and prepared it and came up and put it on his head. I asked him, what's wrong? I don't believe he made a response. He closed his eyes and appeared to be asleep. I slept there by him on the floor for a while. At some point in the night, he said, you may go back to your room. I'll be all right. He stayed in bed until about 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning. And then he was just completely well, like nothing had happened. His spirit was so strong that although he had encountered devastating blows to his body, he had come right out of it. I could tell it wasn't a physical event. He had made a full recovery from what must have been something close to death. One day, while meeting with an Indian man, a Mr. R.B. Pandya from Mombasa, East Africa, Prabhupada mentioned his illness. Mr. Pandya said he owned a house on the ocean at Mombasa where it was always sunny and warm with pleasant sea breezes, a perfect place for Prabhupada to recover his health. Mr. Pandya invited Prabhupada to go and live there as long as he liked. Taking the offer seriously, Prabhupada began to think of going to Africa, not only for health but for preaching. 3 months ago, he had sent Brahmananda Swami and Jagannivasa to East Africa, so a visit there would encourage them as well as enable Prabhupada to work personally at expanding the Krishna consciousness movement on the African continent. Prabhupada sent Bhavananda and Naranarayana from London to Mombasa to see if it would really be possible for him to stay there as Mr. Pandya had suggested. When Bhavananda and Naranarayana arrived, Brahmananda Swami, who had been struggling in East Africa with only one assistant, was delighted to see them and hear that Prabhupada was coming soon. Previously, Brahmananda Swami had been preaching in Florida and Prabhupada had written him to go to Pakistan. Immediately, he had gone along with one assistant, Jagannivasa, flying to Paris and then taking the Orient Express through Eastern Europe. On hearing that war fever was building in Pakistan, Prabhupada had sent a second letter to Brahmananda Swami in Florida advising him not to go to Pakistan. But Brahmananda Swami had never received the letter. En route to Pakistan, while holding public kirtan in Turkey, Brahmananda and Jagannivasa had been arrested and detained for several days on suspicion of being Christian missionaries. Finally, Brahmananda and Jagannivasa had arrived in Pakistan, where students had spit at them, accused them of being spies, threatened them, and called them names. Several times, people on the street had rubbed the Vaishnava tilaka off the devotees' foreheads and warned them not to show themselves in public or they would be stabbed. Local Hindus had warned the devotees to leave as soon as possible, and so they had reluctantly decided to go to Bombay to see Prabhupada. Meanwhile, in Bombay, Prabhupada had read in an Indian newspaper that Pakistani soldiers in Dhaka had killed 4 Hare Krishna missionaries. I am very much anxious to know about Brahmananda, Prabhupada had written. The day has been full of anxiety with this bad news, and still it is going on. When Prabhupada had heard that Brahmananda Swami had actually arrived in Bombay, he had asked to see him at once. Like a father recovering his lost child, Prabhupada had embraced him. You risked your life just on my order, Prabhupada had said. After some days, Prabhupada had told Brahmananda Swami, you should go to Africa. If you go, then we will be on all the continents. Now, after preaching in Africa, Brahmananda Swami eagerly awaited the visit of his beloved spiritual master. Nairobi, September 9, 1971. As Srila Prabhupada disembarked in Nairobi.
Mataji Haribol.
Yeah.
I think we can. Okay, you can continue one more. Okay, one more section. Okay, please go ahead. Go ahead. We'll finish this section. I mean, not the whole thing, but the first part of Nairobi. Please go ahead.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you. As Srila Prabhupada disembarked in Nairobi from the East African Airlines 747 jet, he wore a wool chadar over his shoulders and carried the same white vinyl attache case he had taken with him all over the world. Flanked by his secretary and servant, he walked with his cane across the airfield toward the terminal building. Inside, he sat on a cloth-covered chair and joined in the kirtan while Indians and Africans gathered around to watch. Kulbhushan, a journalist and friend of Brahmananda Swami's, approached Prabhupada with questions. He asked Prabhupada what he had come to teach, and Prabhupada answered, modern civilized man has forgotten his relationship with Krishna or God and is therefore suffering. Whether you are Hindu, Muslim, or Buddhist, that doesn't matter. Unless you re-establish your relationship with God, you cannot be happy. Have you come only for Hindus? Asked Mr. Bhushan. No, Prabhupada replied, for everyone. Mr. Bhushan, East Africa, especially Kenya, is one of those countries which enjoys a great amount of racial harmony in brotherhood of man. What is your special message you can bring to Kenya? Srila Prabhupada, that brotherhood of man can be complete when they are in God consciousness. Otherwise, it will again break. Mr. Bhushan, so your disciples will be making special efforts to teach the Africans rather than confine themselves to the Hindus? That is very important here in this country. Srila Prabhupada, our method is the same, but the method is so powerful that it appeals to everyone. We do not have to convey a new method for a new place. The method is the same, universal. It will appeal to everyone. After spending one night in Nairobi, Prabhupada and his party flew the next day in a small propeller aircraft to Mombasa. Mr. Pandya was away, and his family, although not very enthusiastic, opened their home to Srila Prabhupada. The large house was of contemporary design with rounded corners, porthole windows, and a spacious living room with a veranda facing the ocean. Prabhupada, standing by the window in his room, beheld an aquamarine sea, a cloudless blue sky, and a white sandy beach fringed with palms. Turning back toward Brahmananda Swami and others, he said, Brahmananda told me that this was one of the most beautiful places in the world. Now I see he is correct. Prabhupada had come with a chronic cough, but walking on the beach and relaxing in the Mombasa sunshine, he soon recovered his health. Prabhupada maintained his program, begun in London, of daily dialogues with Shamsundar concerning the Western philosophers. Chronologically, he had proceeded from Socrates to Descartes. Shamsundar.
Descartes. It's called Descartes.
Oh, okay, Descartes. Sorry, Descartes. Shamsundar. He is saying, I think, therefore I am. First of all, he has discovered that I am. This was his innate basis for truth. In his time, there was no real authority. Prabhupada. But this is not big knowledge. Long, long ago, there were so many who could understand I am. This is called Atmanam Manyate Jagat. A fool thinks all others are fools. He is not the first man to realize the identification of the self. Krishna says Aham. Aham evasam evagre. I existed in the beginning, and when everything is finished, I shall continue to exist. This we also say, I existed before this body was created, and I shall exist when the body is annihilated. This conception of I is there in God. It is in me. Then where is the new thing? As soon as he felt better, he was ready to preach. Mombasa, he said, was a small place, and Nairobi, the capital, would be better for preaching. So he returned to Nairobi. Nairobi, September 18, 1970.
One thing we notice here, that Mombasa is like one of the most beautiful places on earth, Prabhupada says, but he's not attached to staying in one of the most beautiful places on earth. He comes to Nairobi, although a small place, better for preaching. This is the life of the Bhagavatas. They're interested in making others into Bhagavatas. They're least interested in all these trivial, and for them it's all trivial, these beautiful places in this world and all that. Yeah, it's beautiful, so what? It's trivial compared to the service of serving Krishna, making others into devotees. Any thoughts, questions, reflections on this section? And of course, one thing very striking is that Prabhupada is so anxious when Brahmananda Prabhu, he heard that 4 Hare Krishna missionaries were shot or killed. Were killed. So then Prabhupada is very, very concerned about it. And you can see how affectionate he is when he sees Brahmananda. So Prabhupada, I mean, this is the nature of the pure devotees. They love everyone, especially those who are carrying out the work of Krishna. I mean, carrying out the missionary, carrying out Lord Chaitanya's missionary work. They're very, very, what do you call it, very fond of them. So there is a certain, what do you call it, you could call it a constitutional bond with those who preach the message of Krishna consciousness. The pure devotees have that kind of a constitutional bond. They have that feeling of that the concern for the preachers is paramount. He said, you try to risk your life on my order. Prabhupada is actually unlimitedly bold. If we were to get any benediction from Prabhupada, this would be one of the most important benedictions to get a drop of that unlimited boldness that Prabhupada had to preach Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, even a drop is as good as an ocean. So even if you get a drop of that from Srila Prabhupada, that's also as good as an ocean.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Maji.
Do we have any like compilation of this discussion between Shamsundar Prabhu and
Yeah,
Prabhupada about those
it's
philosophers?
called dialectic spiritualism.
Okay.
It's available, I think, even in Mayapur. If you look for it, it's there.
Oh, okay.
Original title was dialectic spiritualism, but it could be changed now. It could be Prabhupada on Western philosophers, whatever. But it's there. It's there. It's available, Maji.
Oh, okay. I'll just look for it.
Okay. So if there are no further thoughts or questions or reflections, then we'll end for today and resume next Sunday. Okay. Thank you all very much. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnebhyo namo namaha.